From Vox Markets, I'm Francesca Morgan, and joining me today, I have Stephan Beringer. He's the CEO of Mirriad Advertising, which is an in-content advertising company. Thanks for joining me today, Stephan.
Hi. How are you?
Hi. I'm good, thank you. Now, just for investors who aren't that familiar with Mirriad, when I say in-content advertising, that can seem quite a broad term. So just for those listening who aren't familiar with the company, could you tell us exactly what this means and where the company fits in?
Sure. So in-content advertising, as the term would suggest, is basically a new solution that is only possible today because of the technological advancements, where you put literally the brand, a product, and we all know product placement in the traditional sense, where you physically have put something somewhere in a scene or in scenes, right? And we do this virtually. So in other words, you would be watching a movie on television or on a streaming service or a series, and you will find brands inserted in that content. And that's what we mean with in-content advertising, and what our company is specialized in.
And can you talk a little bit about the technology itself, how it's developed and how the company uses it?
Yeah, absolutely. So the technology went through a couple of iterations. It's literally started first in the world of movies and delivering effects for very famous films, and then transcended that phase to take it into the world of advertisers. And then we started, so rather than inserting, into a special effect, giving Natalie Portman wings, for instance, which was, the Black Swan, taking that further and basically allowing brands to put the products into the content. So that's literally more or less the very core of it, is that effect, which is done in a very, very natural manner, so that the human eye would never realize that anything has been done virtually or artificially after the production. But there's much more around this, because ultimately, as we ingest content from our partners, such as Tencent Video or Channel 4, or many partners in the United States, we have to analyze the content to see where could we actually place, a certain brand into a living room, or another brand into an outdoor situation. And because we ingest so much content, this cannot be done by human beings, right? The human beings are still involved in terms of quality assurance, but it's basically machines analyzing the content so that they identify, it's obviously AI doing that, identify the best possible opportunities for any given brand, right? And out of that, basically now emerges the inventory that gets sold to the advertiser. And from then on, there's a whole chain of command, if you will, on how to execute these campaigns. And if I just may add the last point, how can I say that the biggest highlight now, and that this is literally the new phase we're entering, is that we're delivering these scenes or these modified pieces of content with brands within in a dynamic manner. In other words, you and I could be watching the same film on a streaming service, and you would be seeing a certain scene with a certain brand within it, and I would see a different brand in it, because we're two different people. And so that is obviously, what 2-3 years ago sounded like science fiction, and advertising is now becoming the reality.
I know this might be a difficult question to pin down, but could you give us a picture of what an average customer might look like to us?
Yeah, I mean, average customers, it's a very good question. We have to look at it on two sides. Number one, at the end of the day, it's an advertiser. It's a big brand, or smaller brand for the matter, right? Who in a way pays for the advertisement, as they do today, right? They buy a cinema advertisement, print advertisement, and television, and so forth. And so ultimately, it's the brand, it's the advertiser who pays for the advertiser. So you could say the ultimate client is the brand. The brand or the advertiser works through an agency, so those two come together, and they are typically, of course, one audience that we speak to a lot, and where we build big partnerships, because they're the ones who say, we want to launch a new electric vehicle, and in the case of a car brand, what can you recommend or suggest to us in terms of where we could place this new car that we are releasing, right, in content that is sort of fresh in the market, etc., so that we can penetrate the idea of this new car and basically start shaping opinions in the market, right? So anyway, I'll stop there. So that's one side of the market. The other side is really the typical customer is a television broadcaster, so or network. You can say Channel 4 is a perfect example. where, you know, you have, as you all know, there's a growing need to produce more and more content. Content is expensive, and so, you know, new means of revenue generation are very, very important for all the companies that are involved in content production and distribution. So, you know, and Channel 4 is a more how can I say, is a traditional broadcasting network, but of course there's digital platforms, there's the streaming services and so forth. So in China, for instance, Tencent Video, which is the second largest VOD platform, streaming platform in the world, is one of our clients.
Now, ahead of your results, you recently announced a few strategic hires.
Yeah.
Now, as I understand it, the emphasis here around this move is the company's ambitions for the US market, which is clearly a key growth area. Can you just talk through your largest markets and your involvement in these?
Right. So you know, ultimately we're operating really in the largest markets in the world, namely the United States, 3 key markets in Europe, in China, and we've just started operating in Japan, and making some very good progress there. What I'd like to add, though, is that when you look at, you know, the United States of America as a single advertising market, it is actually, when you look at the spending of advertisers every year in video and television, but in general, it is actually bigger than all the 5 markets together after the United States taken together. That's how big and important the US market is. And that eventually, you know, explains also why we're putting so much emphasis into the United States of America, because it's just, you know, the most important market, but not only from a quantitative standpoint, but when you think about, you know, how the US are shaping the many industries, right? You look at the whole world of ad tech, basically you say all dominating platforms have been, you know, developed and have emerged in the United States. When you think about, you know, streaming services, where the main streaming service is coming from, it's from the United States. Where's most content produced, it's in the United States, and so forth. So I could go on for quite some time. Now let's take the leap forward. We've made some very important moves last year in terms of really progress that is showing visibly, like really an acceleration in terms of our stature in the market. And now 2 hires that are very important for us. Number one, Matt Douglas, who has joined us to lead all the programmatic endeavors. And programmatic, if you allow me, is a very, very important step change for us, because ultimately that's the way we will make inventory accessible in the big buying platforms. You know, and that is the recipe to scale. So Matt is in charge of that. And then Zach Reeder, who's LA based, is in charge of developing, you know, content partnerships, producer relationships, et cetera, which is obviously very, very important that we are in very close relationships with the full, you know, content industry that, you know, primarily resides on the West Coast, but it's not only the West Coast.
And when you talk about the US being the main growth market, does that include the North American market, including Canada?
Yes. Yeah. Sorry. Thank you for calling me out here. So the US, of course, the United States of America is the biggest, but we look at North America as one big geography, one big market. And so adding Canada this year actually was a very, very important step for us. We have signed a partnership agreement with Bell Media. We have, you know, a lot of client interest, campaigns being booked, etc. So that has been a very important move. So you're right for asking that question. It's literally North America we're looking at.
And as I understand it, a first campaign here has already been launched, hasn't it?
Yeah. So that was immediately after signing, and it was a campaign that came on the back of the Super Bowl. And there's, of course, I cannot disclose anything, but there's a lot of current activity in the pipeline, and so I'm quite hopeful that in Canada alone there will be some very good momentum now.
And outside this market, I mean, you said there's this increasing need for producing content, and that's not going anywhere. Where else do you expect to see this momentum continue outside the US?
Well, I mean, it's a global need, right? And let's just pick Netflix last announcement. You know, when Netflix has been quite adamant about the fact that they will not take on any advertising, right, into their platform, and now they had to, or they did changed that declaration, if you will, and now are accepting the fact that they will have to introduce advertising, to be seen in what shape or form. And it just signals that even the most I should say advanced in terms of having been there for many years platform is ultimately in need of advertising revenue to fund the content that ultimately the viewers enjoy. And so what we will see over time is a complete, how can I say, spectrum in terms of the different platforms, but all of them will need more advertising to fund content, right? If that's a local company or it's a globally acting company, it's all the same picture. And to that extent, this is where we come in, is that advertising in the traditional way, and takes me back to your very first question, right? Interrupting people as they watch their content is something you can do to some certain extent, but at some point you're just annoying people so much that they will just not watch your content anymore. And so our solution, which is non-intrusive, it happens in the content and enhances the content, which is basically what research says is the solution to go for.
And can you tell us, are you able to put a figure on the market potential of this core market? Sorry,
yeah.
I didn't mention that.
No, it's a good question. There's two things I like to say to you. So one, it's the total market. If we take North America and the 5 key markets I've mentioned to you, we're talking about around about 150-160 billion US dollars in terms of what advertisers are spending every year in television and video advertisement. Okay, so let's just put this number into place: 160 million. And as I said earlier, the US is more than half of that. So so that's the one thing to consider. The other one, so you could say that's our TAM, total addressable market. The other side to look at is that we, Mirriad, can create approximately 10 to 20 advertising opportunities on every hour of content, right? So let's keep that in mind, 10 to 20 opportunities per hour. On average, when we watch television or, you go on YouTube or whatever, you are probably exposed between 20 and 30 ads per hour, maybe a little bit more, maybe a little bit less. And that means that we can actually add 50% almost to the current levels of advertising through in-content advertising opportunities. And I think, I don't want to break down the fantasy numbers here, but that tells us that there's an enormous multi-billion potential for, in-content advertising. I don't want to, limit us to a number, but it is gigantic.
Amazing. And you've just published your results for the year. Could you take us through some of the highlights here and how it reflects the company's progress?
Yeah, I'd like to basically take on two data points here. One, broadly speaking, we remained stable in terms of the revenue over 2020. I'd like to say that, for us as a young company, it's not been that easy to cope with COVID in terms of managing the company. That was one side, and I think we did extremely well there. Because we were already a Zoom company, et cetera, but building the business is tough when you want to do this remotely, right? Building trust with new partners, et cetera. So we were slowed down by that. And in addition to that, as you all know, advertising spend came back in the second half of the year, but we were still not sort of totally benefiting from that, momentum again, because the fact is that in recessions or when times are tough, advertisers tend to invest into solutions that they know, okay, so where they have the mechanics and the maths in place, and rather than going for innovative new solutions. So that's something that we have certainly not benefited from. So I mean, COVID definitely hurt us. So we're quite happy that we maintained the number. What made us extremely happy is actually the number in the US, where we grew by over 180%. And that really goes back to, the strategic decision to double down in the States and really go in full investment mode in the US, and which we started in 2020. So I have to say that, all the stats show extremely positive signs. We had a phenomenal second half of the year in the US. Ran, I don't know how many Christmas campaigns for multiple brands. So this is it's like day and night in the States. And for me, don't take me wrong, it's not about de-emphasizing other markets. We have very, very distinct strategies in all countries, but the US is definitely the market for all the reasons I've mentioned to you earlier, to really, go big and win big.
Of course. Now, just in terms of outlook, what can investors expect going ahead, both, for short term, but long term as well?
So currently short term, I mean, we are trading according to pretty in line with our expectations. So that's all good. There's momentum in all markets. That's good too. I think what you will see, or what everyone will see this year, is sort of the next big step of the company in terms of until now we've been very, very focused on driving adoption between buyers, who I mentioned earlier, right? The advertisers and the agencies, and the suppliers, who are the content companies, and getting that wheel turning, right, has been sort of the big effort. Now the next step is, as we have gained this stature in the market in terms of a relevance as a product, a relevance as a ultimately a partner in the market who can help make more money or drive more growth. We're taking the next big step, which is the integration into the programmatic ecosystem. And that's really what the next expectation is about, is to see that, Mirriad will evolve as a company that is literally enabling a whole marketplace, if you will, the in-content marketplace, with the help or through the integration with, the programmatic ecosystem. And the way to think about it is that, there's platforms out there that all clients in the world use to buy media, to buy inventory. And the inventory that we create has to be listed in these platforms. And that's how we will get to massive scale. And so, between delivering dynamic campaigns, as I said earlier, right, you're seeing one version, I'm seeing a different one, and then enabling the buys so that an advertiser can do this in a platform automatically. That's really what we will see this year evolving. On top of course, all the different developments in the markets themselves in terms of the growth, expanding remit of, major advertisers. We didn't speak too much about that, but we have really a very strong list of blue chip advertisers who are running campaigns in content with us. We have a growing portion of repeat business, which is something we're very, very focused on as well. So there's positive developments on the commercial side, but also, as I said earlier, just from a platform and ecosystem integration. And that is the key to scale, right? Our ultimate vision or ambition is to become a line item in media plans, and that's the way to go.
That's great. Well, Stephan, thank you so much for joining me. And given the climate, as you've just described, demand is clearly going to increase. So we look forward to tracking Mirriad.
Thank you. Thank you very much.
Thank you.